Donald Trump's war against Iran widens. What's going to happen to the world economy, and how are we going to get out of this mess? That is our top story on the line. Well, hello, everybody. This is not a good news day around the world as the war that has plunged the world economy into teetering on the brink, those are mixed metaphors, of some kind of disaster widened dramatically today. It seems as if what's happening is the gradual pressure not on Iran, but on the United States is getting tested and pushed. And there is a sense that Iran and its allies and proxies around the Middle East have the upper hand. All right, so what happened today and over the weekend? Well, over the weekend, as you might have heard, 3 more American service members were killed in this miserable war that Trump has launched, 2 in Jordan and 1 in Iraq. And those men and 1 woman were serving the country and under the bombing, these missiles that Iran continues to be able to fire, not just at the American targets, but at Kuwait. Over the weekend, critical infrastructure, water desalination was hit in Kuwait. Right across the region, Qatar has been hit. And for all of the bombing that Trump has said basically finished off the Iranian military, they are surely continuing to be capable of causing major damage. Not necessarily physically, although the deaths that these missiles are causing are terrible. And certainly the water desalination issue in the Middle East is desperate. If you hit those targets, that's the end of those societies for a good while, because they were built up over the past 30 or 40 years on water desalination. And so Iran targeting these things, they don't have to hit much to make a point, to make a difference, to take control. And that's what we're hearing. So what Trump has done is declare that he will respond in a way that this time will show Iran what's what. He put out on his Truth Social today yet another kind of blustering threat, which we're apparently carrying through on. Trump said early this morning, every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over, exclamation point. This directive has been passed on to Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Daniel Kaine, and every leader in the military, President Donald J. Trump. Well, what does that mean? Well, certainly an escalation of American force against Iran, against the military, what's left of it, and against the people. And Iran, what Trump is demanding is that the military go further in calling infrastructure legitimate military targets than we have before. And that of course is a problem for the U.S. military, because they fight with honor, they fight under law, and the problem that they might have is that they cross that line, and Trump can pardon them, but they will carry them with that. Okay, so what you're looking at, our next slide, is Yemen. So Yemen is a long way from Iran, right? But Iran, because the Yemenis, the Houthis are Shia Muslims and were inspired by the Iranian Revolution back in 1979, they're a proxy, and Iran funds them and arms them, and they're a problem for Saudi Arabia. Look, the real thing about the Middle East, about the Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Gulf, because the one side is Arab, Saudi Arabia is the power there. The other side is Persian, Iran is the power there. They've been fighting for centuries. And the Houthis are a kind of knife at the back of Saudi Arabia, because they are to the south of Saudi Arabia, and they straddle the Gulf of Bab el-Mandab, the Red Sea, and then the narrow passageway out of the Red Sea and into the Indian Ocean. And today, this is what they said. The Yemeni Armed Forces declared a maritime embargo against the criminal Saudi enemy based on the equation of an eye for an eye, effective immediately upon the issuance of this statement. Now, what that means, the Saudis and the Yemenis have been fighting. They've gone to war a couple of times. There's a constant kind of low-grade friction there. But that's that's a false claim. The Yemeni, they aren't the Yemeni armed forces, they're actually the Houthi armed forces, but they claim to be the Yemeni armed forces. They aren't doing it to get at Saudi Arabia. They love that. They're doing it because their Iranian paymasters told them to. Second, we affirm the right of our great people to respond to the blockade with the blockade. So they're going to blockade all shipping in the Red Sea. They won't be able to get out. The rest of it is, I mean, you should see, if you go online and see the guy who announced this, it looks like it's out of some kind of Peter Sellers movie for people who remember him. It's ridiculous. That said, it's desperately serious. Right now, there's 20% of the world's oil that's been shut down because it can't transit through the Strait of Hormuz that Iran has closed once again. And the Red Sea carries 15% of all goods shipped around the world. 15%. And so this is a desperate situation here. And what can Trump do? Well, he can bomb, right? He can bomb and bluster and threaten and encourage them to get nastier or even more dangerous when it comes to law. So Sar said he has no idea how to get out. That is it. That's 100%. Andy, well, what is really the condition of U.S. bases in the Middle East? That's a very good point as well. And Benjamin said Iran loves it when he makes public statements. Don't get it in a fool's way, that's for sure. So let's take those one at a time. So he has no idea to get out, right? One of the things we're seeing, this is really important. Iran continues to lay out and execute a war plan they've had for decades. They have expected this war at some point, and they have prepared for it with vast tunnel structures underground for their little speedboats that can carry, explosives to destroy ships, for all their missile launchers. The U.S. intelligence community assessed that Iran still has 70% of its launchers and missile capability. So Trump blusters about how we destroyed their ability to fight back. Well, look, we haven't. And so on the one side, you have a regime that's been in place for decades expecting this war and has war gamed it out, has prepared for it with vast infrastructure and with redundancy in command. You know, when they were hit last year in a very successful strike that did decimate their nuclear weapons program, Iran expected that the next one would go after the leadership. And so they devolved all kinds of responsibilities and all kinds of communications and other tactical equipment downward through the ranks. So that Trump, like, say, we killed all the first rank and then all the second rank. Well, it turns out Iran expected that. And they expected this kind of the key question, will the United States have the stomach for a real war that will be very difficult to fight against us? Or can we, at a pretty low cost, I mean, they've had a devastating cost in bombing, but in their munitions, shut down the strait, bring economic pressure, and now get their allies out in the Red Sea to shut down that? And what's Trump's response? Trump is a reactive and transactional guy. You've seen it that's the way he's dealt in his business life, his whole life. He pushes, he tries to muscle you, he welches on the deal, and if he has to, he walks away. He BS's you, he kisses up to you, he screws you over, and then he walks away, right? You can't BS your way out of a war. And this is where we are. We're led by a man who didn't think this through, doesn't think things through generally. He's got the intelligence, and it's superior intelligence in this way, of a shark. He knows when there's blood in the water more than any politician or statesman I've ever seen. And he preys on it, on the weak and on the vulnerable. And if he confronts a stronger adversary, he runs. Files for bankruptcy, blusters, slinks back. Remember he slunk back to Mar-a-Lago the day that Joe Biden was inaugurated president? He couldn't even bear to be there because he couldn't bear to acknowledge that he won. And he's now imposed that he lost. He's imposed that on the whole country. So that's what we're looking at right here. We're looking at a kind of mismatch. All right, the mismatch between a well-prepared regime, hateful regime, vicious regime, deserves to fall. We should have helped them. I mean, Obama kind of stood off to the side when the Iranian people rose during his administration. Trump stood off to the side in his first term. He stood off to the side in this term. And this was supposed to be their deliverance. And there were people in the streets. But they aren't going in the streets now because there were 50,000 of them murdered by their own government. And they thought, okay, well, maybe America's coming to do the job. They didn't know Donald Trump. He doesn't care about them at all. He would have claimed liberator if they had risen up, but they aren't going to. And so this regime is strong in its own way. They are prepared and they're executing on a plan. And the last thing I'll say about this is the most dangerous part. This is the wild card. Trump is fighting a war as, a Western tycoon. He doesn't really believe in anything. He believes in getting what he can, screwing over the other guy. For the regime in Iran, significant portion of the governing structure of Iran, especially in the Revolutionary Guard Corps, this is a cosmic conflict dictated by God himself. This is religious. This is the great Satan against God's own chosen people, the Iranians. Don't think they don't believe it. A lot of them don't in the civilian structure of the government, in the bureaucratic structure of the government. But you don't get to be a top commander in the IRGC, in the Revolutionary Guard Corps, unless you're on board, unless you're a zealot. And by killing the Ayatollah, it oddly strengthened the other Ayatollahs. A lot of them are corrupt, but at bottom they became Ayatollahs because they heard a calling from God. And that's a wild card in war. They aren't going to give up. They're going to run away. They're going to keep pushing, keep pressing, because this is their mission. This is their mission assigned from God as their own most recent prophet, the Ayatollah Khomeini, back in the 1970s and 80s, who accomplished the Iranian revolution by instilling this fire of deliverance from corruption into a holy people that has worn down over the years, but not in the ruling cadres. So Agnes says, I just saw how our Secretary of State Rubio is expecting our allies to send their men power and armaments for USA to control and throw at Iran. We're not asking for their thoughts and suggestions. Well, that's very interesting, because I was thinking today, how is he going to get out of this? His officers, his military, are saying, well, okay, we're the guys with the guns, and here's what you can do. You can back off, and see if you can get back to the negotiating table. You can up the ante. We can hit them harder and hurt them more, and we can call some things that are kind of civilian infrastructure. We can say they're also military use, so we can knock them out. Or you can put boots on the ground in a limited fashion to take over Karg Island, which is their big oil place, or go all out. I saw that retired General Barry McCaffrey said it would take a year and 600,000 troops on the ground. Donald Trump's not going to do that. What is he going to do? He's going to look for a way to get out. And one of the ways to get out is to say, this is Europe's problem. You've already heard him say this. We don't get much oil from there at all. That's a foolish way of, ask farmers if we don't get fertilizer from the Persian Gulf. Ask them if we don't get diesel from the Persian Gulf. Right? We do. So he's lying, of course. But what he's trying to do is say, we're NATO, we've protected you. Yeah, we protected you under a treaty, agreed that if you're attacked, we will come to your defense. It's one of the greatest accomplishments of diplomacy. It kept the peace in Europe. Europe is a place, by the way, and I should wrap this up quickly, but in my experience over the years and reading into European history and covering the wars in Bosnia and in Kosovo and in Ukraine and seeing what's happening there now, Europe is a place whose natural state, all these, it's not a very big place in terms of, if you compare it, except for Russia, but if you compare it with Asia or Africa or North America or South America, but there's 30, 40 countries there or something, and they hate each other. And their natural state for 1,000 years and more has been war. I mean, I'm serious. I remember when I was living in London, and the subject of the nation of France would come up, they'd say something incredibly nasty about the French. And I'd laugh thinking, okay, it's kind of your rivalry. And you could feel the heat under it after a while. And I realized they really hate those people. They've gone to war a lot against them, not in a long time, and they're good allies now. And they're all made the best. The only way that Europe works is when there is a power over it that can bring them together. That was the Holy Roman Empire for a while. There was the Roman Empire before that. That was in some ways the EU. What the EU has done made them all rich. Okay, but I remember thinking, the natural state of Europe is war. So the United States and NATO kept Europe out of war for a good long time, and I'm not sure it's going to hold. You could already feel it fraying around the edges. End of digression. The point of NATO is if Europe is attacked, we come to their defense. Or if the United States is attacked, they came to ours. The only time Article 5 of NATO, which is that mutual defense clause, was ever invoked was after 9/11. The Europeans said, yes, you've been attacked. There's an alliance made to fight against the Soviet Union, but you've been attacked. You are our allies, and we will say that. All right, so there we go. That is the mess of the war. All right, much more briefly now, I promise. I wanted to get to this judge's ruling. So Paramount has agreed to take over Warner Brothers, making them a gigantic player in the production of all kinds of entertainment, right? From streaming series to big-time movies to all kinds of other things. And it just so happens that Paramount was sold last year to the Ellison family, who are chummy with Trump, and that got greenlighted right away by Trump's FTC. And now Paramount wants to swallow up Warner Brothers, right? Well, in buying Paramount, though, Ellison's got a hold of CBS News, and we saw what happened there to 60 Minutes and to others. And now they're going after Warner Brothers, which is CNN at the end of the day. And I got to tell you something. I've noticed a change in my friends and colleagues at CNN. I think they're very conscious that a new boss is in town and that they're concerned about that. Now, this merger hasn't gone through yet, okay? Although Barry Weiss is supposedly going to take over, but the Paramount takeover of Warner Brothers has not completely gone through. And today, in the Northern District of California, Judge Araceli Martinez-Olguin, who is a federal district court judge, has called a timeout on this whole thing, right? A temporary restraining order. Do not do anything else to accomplish this merger until I take a look at this lawsuit that was brought to challenge the merger. Well, it's a lawsuit brought by 12 states, 12 Democratic attorneys general, led by Rob Bonta of California, who's a very accomplished and good attorney general. And what they're saying is that essentially what this merger will do is reduce competition in basic cable licensing and in wide release films. And they do the math and they say with this merger, Paramount, Warner Brothers, the Ellison family would control 30% of that business. And that's an important number because 30% is basically the threshold number that these days judges look at when they decide whether there's been an antitrust violation. Too much concentration of power, right? That's what this case is. It's an antitrust case brought by the states against the Paramount Warner Brothers merger. And what Judge Martinez-Olguin said was that the balance of the equities, that essentially it looks to her as she takes a first look at things, tips in favor of the plaintiffs, of the Democratic attorneys general, who say their citizens are going to be denied more choices because there'll be fewer movies produced and more important, prices will go up because there'll be less competition. That's the whole point of antitrust, right? However, I got to tell you, it seems to me she is entertaining the merits of this case. She says it sounds solid to me. So Sariatha says Trump is in power largely because of corrupt media and corrupt money. Yes, it's a pay-to-play administration. Don't even get me started. No, I have to mention this. Trump, according to Dan Pfeiffer and Bloomberg, have has now given major banks and financial institutions access to his Truth Social tweets before the general public has it. Now, Truth Social is basically his press office. So when he announces a big ceasefire in the war or something like that, even seconds, sending those Truth Socials to these companies who pay to get in on that ground floor, that can mean millions and millions of dollars. Just open corruption, selling the confidential information of our government, in other words, our information, to these banks and financial companies. It's just an open, it's open corruption. All right, here, the challenge for the plaintiffs is that do states really have a right to sue? One of the things that Paramount is saying is, well, you aren't really hurt that badly. This is pretty speculative, your injury here. You're going to say prices are going to go up. Well, how do you know that? And the market of the 30% level, you're defining it. You're gerrymandering it, basically, is what they're saying. I think that was actually Paramount's words. It's like 30% of wide release blockbuster films and basic cable licensing. Well, think of the media world we live in right now. How much does that actually restrict your access to movies and sports and TV? And I think the answer to that is not that much. So I don't expect this lawsuit to succeed. I think she may end up writing an opinion blocking it for a while. But my hunch is she's over her skis right now, that the higher courts will look at this and say, that's not our business to police that level of economic activity unless you can show genuine harm to consumers. Now, we'll see. There, paid TV cable channels and, I guess 30% of that. It seems to me that the market definitions do feel a little bit narrow there, and that's not going to work on appeal. That said, this is how these authoritarian regimes that we see around the world operate. They kind of strip assets, or they buy assets from media assets, and they give them to their cronies. They make sure their cronies get those. I mean, we saw that with the Paramount deal. Trump put his thumb on the scale for Paramount. He made that clear. His regulators made that clear. And all this started, and this is the last thing I'll say on that before we get some fun stuff. This all started with Vladimir Putin, as far as I can see. So in the Soviet Union, in which Putin grew up, the way you kept people down was with jackbooted thugs and shooting them in the head in the basement on Dzerzhinsky Square, that building on Dzerzhinsky Square, right? If you've never seen The Death of Stalin, you should see that movie. It's funny, believe it or not. Putin, and this is a fact of the 21st century that no one should ever forget, Putin's a lawyer. Putin went to law school in what was then called Leningrad. And he destroys freedom by law, by manipulating the law, by corrupting the law. He doesn't need jackbooted thugs and bullets in the back of the head in the basement of the building at Dzerzhinsky Square. He doesn't need that. He just uses the courts. And in some ways, that's what we're seeing in the whole universe of Trump's cronies taking over businesses, taking over the media business as well, because the media is where they go first. When Putin took over, I was there back in 98, and it was the Wild West, Moscow, which is where I was. You could feel it, for better and worse. It was the Wild West, but it was free. I mean, in a crazy way. The criminals were freer more than anybody else, and people elected Putin because they thought he could crack down on that. But gradually, the first thing they go after, he sold off the media assets to the oligarchs, or he had them buy them, and then he brought the oligarchs to heel, and now he controls pretty much all media in Russia. We're headed there at a small level, and I don't think we're going to get there because our traditions are so much stronger. All right. Now the fun stuff. Did you see the World Cup? No, I'm not a soccer fan. I just didn't grow up with it. But it's a beautiful game. Although the final was incredibly boring. I'm going to say that. So they were all in. It was just Spain kind of pity patty, pity patty, pity patty, pity patty, pity patty, shot, miss, save for whatever it was, hour and a half with one goal. That said, for the world, this is a huge event. And for so many people in the United States who love soccer, the younger generations than me who played it, it was part of their school history. Their kids play it and all that stuff. And it was such a great moment to have the United States host this, right? Because the Europeans came over and they found out who we really are. We aren't Trump. The vast majority of us, even if people voted for him, we're Americans still, right? We're basically decent people. We're friendly enough. I mean, I remember, being overseas, people don't expect, to be looked in the eye. There's some cultures where that's wrong, where Americans always look in the eye. Just strike up a conversation on the tube, the London subway. Try that sometime. My wife, who was pregnant at the time, saw somebody reading a book that she liked. And said, "Oh, I love that book." And the guy looked at her like she was a monster. You just don't do it. It's not the done thing. Americans do that. My favorite story, I've told it before, it comes from the Olympics, the classic American classlessness, and in the best sense of the word. We are not a classed people. The British are a classed people. The Russians are a classed people. We are not a classed people. We don't have classes. We do, but not in this way. So 1912 Olympics, Jim Thorpe wins the decathlon and the pentathlon, goes up to get his medal. The king of Sweden at the time, it gives him his medal and his ribbon. And he says, "You, sir, are the greatest athlete in all the world." And Thorpe, before all of the assembled reporters, says, "Thanks, King," walks away. That's an American. All right. So they got a taste of that. They loved it. We loved them. I was watching a Cubs game. There were Norwegian fans in the ballpark doing the row, row, row cheer. At the end of the World Cup, this marathon sporting event, Donald Trump, and he had threatened, and there was talk about him doing it. He wanted to be in the victor's photo. The guys who had earned the World Cup, the Spanish team, he wanted to get in. So at the end, he did. The best part was Spain editing Trump out of their celebratory photo. That happened indeed, but so did this. So sure enough, Trump, he gets to award the trophy, I guess. He's the president of the host country. Fine, that's good. And then you can see him trying to wheedle and bully his way to the middle of that team so that he can stand there when they've got the golden football, and be part of their celebration. Now, watch this. You're going to see two things if you have. I'm sure you've seen this. Watch it again and see how Trump, something you might have missed the first time. The first thing he wants to do is literally take a step into the middle of the team with them around him. And the Spanish captain puts his arm on his back and pushes him away. All right, so that's one thing. Second thing is the head of FIFA, a corrupt man, good friend of Trump's, nevertheless didn't want this. So he, after they hand out the trophy, he disappears off to the side of the stage. And he then sees Trump trying to wheedle his way into the thing. And he runs down, tries to push Trump off. Trump stands, won't go. Yeah, he gets pushed off to the side, but he stands off to the side for the confetti to go up, and he's doing his big Trump thing. Listen to how the Australian Broadcasting Service captured this moment.
In 2026, the champions of the world are Spain.
Is now, so they can edit him out of that.
They can edit him out of that, right? They can add him out of that, right? Well, they did. They did as Sariatha said. No, as Starr said. Yeah, they in that photograph. It's a beautiful photograph. They literally edited him out. They AI'd him out of existence, which I'm sure just absolutely killed him. Well, this became a meme around the world. So Trump says all the time, we're the hottest country in the world. Sorry, I don't curse. Well, what does that mean? Well, what does it mean, the hottest country? People talk about us a lot because they hate us. because they hate our president. They hate what he's done to the world economy. They hate his values, most of them. And they think he's just a jerk. And they can't believe that the Americans, it's one of the reasons why it was so refreshing to have so many people in our country celebrating the World Cup and watching these matches. They can't believe the Americans elected this terrible man. I like to say, look, I'm a reporter. I covered him. I covered him straight in the first term. Certainly, I think the second term was different. We're called for a different kind of coverage. But I say, if you were to sit down and write the worst possible fictional character that you could put in a novel or a movie, no one would believe you if you had written Donald Trump. They wouldn't. It'd be boring. Now, come on. All right, not that, not this, and yes, this. So again, this was done I think in the United States, but the whole world loved it. Take a look at what somebody mashed up, and the music is by Radiohead, one of my favorite bands, and the song is appropriately called "Creep."
I wish I was special. You're so fucking special. But I'm a creep. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here.
Oh, that's just good fun. That's just good fun. And that's important, right? Trump as a politician is gifted in his viciousness towards the vulnerable and in his hatred of his opponents. He's a world-class hater, as somebody once said. That was me. Got fired for it. I think it's an accurate description. And that strikes fear and depression and anxiety in the hearts of so many people. And he has, because he's the president of the United States. He got this enormous power. And in this second term, as I say, it's different. He's unleashed. There's no James Mattis, Secretary of Defense, to calm him, to check his worst impulses. Rubio and Vance and all the rest of them, all they do is encourage him. So laughter is important. Laughter is really important. We thank God for our comedians and the gifted millions who are able to do the magic with the memes and lift our spirits in the face of what is darkness. We're in a serious struggle, right? We're in a very serious struggle. Mockery is healthy in this moment, I think, and especially when it's done that well. I love that. And Judy says, Terry, please try to get Hunter Biden on your show. He's a great guest. I will. You know what? So this is one of the things I'm doing. On realpatriotism.com, where most of my work lives now, started up this thing called The Notebook. Take a look at it. I want kind of feedback. I'm thinking of it as a civic newsroom where we're all involved in the story development, right? I'm going around the country, 4, 5, 6 states and races around the country for the midterms. And I'm counting on people who are in those states, who know people, who know the issues, who know, what I should drill down on and can book guests and all that. So if you know Hunter Biden, let me know. But I did reach out to him, but I don't have I have a way of getting a hold of him, I think. I have a friend of a friend who knows him. And I covered his trial. And I covered it straight. And I covered it not as a game show like it felt, but I covered it as a family tragedy, which it was. It was like I covered a lot of trials in my life, and you realize how hard it is for families. And so Hunter Biden's a great idea, because he's got Trump's number, doesn't he? Look, I've also criticized Hunter Biden, so I don't know if he'd for doing business off of his father's name in Ukraine. He was a railroad guy. All of a sudden, he's a natural gas executive in Ukraine. I'm not buying that. That was a conflict of interest. But we can laugh. He's got a great sense of humor. He's wicked smart and funny on social media. If you haven't checked him out, check him out. And keep your spirits up. Look, I'm going to take a hiatus from this for a while. I've got I've got a seminar I've got to teach, and I need to prepare for that. That's coming in a couple of weeks. So I want to make sure that we can sort of do this in a way that puts it on a path to success. But I appreciate you all being there, and we'll come back. We'll come back on the line.